Wow. We're recording. We're live, friends. Don't embarrass me.
All right. Thank you guys all for attending. It's electric. This is some updates with the Registrar's Office and Disability Support Services with emphasis on electronic workflows. So some of our processes have already been moving to the electronic workflow. We started back in 2017 with instructor withdrawals, reinstatements, and never attend forms. And many of you have already been processing them through our eTrieve system. But when COVID-19 hit and we had to go work from home, our electronic processes grew rapidly. Some of it not necessarily through eTrieve, because we just didn't have the time to build all of that. But we had to change how we were handling things in order to accommodate all of the students who were working with us from distance. So we have some new processes within eTrieve, or just new processes in general. We have some updates to current processes that we do have, and some PDFs and approved communications, and then some of our future changes within the Registrar's Office in this presentation. So new processes is one of our newest processes that we've done digitally is the student-initiated withdrawal. In the past, students would come to the Registrar's Office, get a sheet of paper, fill out what classes they're going to withdraw from, and then take it to their instructor or the division chair if they could not get their instructor, and have them sign off on the withdrawal, bring the form back, and then we process that. Well, when people weren't allowed to come to campus or weren't able to come to campus, we had to change that process. So what we've done is we've used the registrar at coastalcarolina.edu email account, and we ask that students send an email from their coastal email account requesting to withdraw from a class or multiple classes. So they send the request in, and we reply to them, and we also include the instructor in that reply with a response, and I'll show you what that response looks like. And we ask that the instructor then responds to that email to let us know that we can either go ahead and process the withdrawal, or perhaps they've communicated with the student, they've worked things out, and they're going to keep the student's going to remain in the class. If we do not hear back from the instructor, a lot of times we assume that things worked out, but we don't know definitively. So we kind of use that as the way that the student didn't bring the form back to us. Once we receive a response from the instructor, then we actually process the withdrawal, and it is the date that we use is the date that the request was made. This is what the email looks like that we send out. There's a lot of information in it, so I know it's a little wordy, but we found that this is the best way to communicate to the students and let them know that, well, we did tell you. The student is encouraged to reach out to their instructor. That doesn't always happen. The instructor can reach out to the student as well to determine if it's, trying to keep them enrolled in the class. If the student has an A, but they're choosing to withdraw because they didn't do so well on one assignment, that communication with the instructor kind of helps them realize, oh, I've got, I can keep up with this class. I don't need to withdraw. But this second statement here that says, if you still determine withdrawing is what is best for the individual or for your individual situation, then the instructor will send an email confirming your intent to withdraw and initiate the withdrawal process. We need that email from the instructor to let us know to go ahead and proceed. Once we hit the official withdrawal date for your class, and we do look if it's second 8 weeks or first 8 weeks or whatever time that withdrawal period is, we need to know if the grade is going to be a W or an F. You do have the ability to determine if you're going to assign a W or an F based on how the student is performing in the class. We do also encourage the student to reach out to financial aid and the veterans programs so that they can make sure that they are good to go with their funding. We are working with IT or Information System Support Services to create a student-initiated withdrawal form that will go through the eTrieve, but the workflow is going to be very much the same way that we do the email process. The student will fill out the form on eTrieve, and then instead of getting an email from the registrar's office, instructors will get an email that looks either like this in your inbox, but the statement would say like the workflow package withdrawal from this class has been submitted by this person and is available for your review. Please click here. By clicking here, it takes you into the eTrieve system, and then you'll be able to look at the form, add some information, and then approve it. Once you approve the form, it will come to the registrar's office and we will process it. This is what the form would look like. The term is auto-generated, as is the date here, but the student will choose what section of class they are withdrawing from. They are only able to fill out one per class. We do have a different form if they're withdrawing from everything, but if they want to withdraw from 2 classes, they have to do one for each class. It auto-generates the instructor's first name, last name, and email address. If there are more than one instructor assigned to this class, so it's a class in lab, or it has multiple instructors in an allied health class or cosmetology, for example, then it selects the first instructor of record. And then the student is able to provide comments, and it will route to the instructor. This is the information the instructor sees, and they can then put the grade that they're going to assign, the F or W, adhering to the official withdrawal date policy, and then what letter grade they are earning at that time. That helps for reporting purposes for our research office, and then their date of last attendance, and any comments that they may have. So that form would come to the registrar's office and we process it just like we do your withdrawals. If a student is trying to withdraw from all classes, they send the request into registrar at coastalcarolina.edu, and then we process it similarly to the regular withdrawal, only we send it to academic counselors first. That way they can meet with the student per the catalog's policy and decide, is it in the best interest of the student to withdraw from all classes, or maybe they're going to stay in 1 or 2, or whatever's going on. Once they've talked to the student and had some sort of decision made, they'll let us know. And then we will send out the same emails that we were sending out so the instructor can see that the student is planning to withdraw from their class. We, again, will need a response from the instructor. When we move that to an eTrieve form, again, very similar. So it's going to route to an academic counselor first, then it would route to the instructor. You would see very much the same thing, the little notification in your inbox, and then a message that looks very similar. You would complete and approve the form, and we would process it. This is kind of what it looks like for the student. It's a real simple form. The term auto-generates, and then the classes, all of their classes will show up. That way the counselor will know what's going on and that kind of thing. We are splitting the form after we approve it, so that it can route to the different instructors. We do have some updates to some of our current processes, like the instructor withdrawal. That will still be completed through eTrieve. There will be drop-downs, but the appearance of the drop-downs have changed a little bit. I'm going to show you what that looks like. We're not going to be able to forward date something, so if you are submitting it today, you cannot use tomorrow's date as the withdrawal date. There are going to be some new comment fields available, and then we are working on some automatic emails that are going to be sent to the student, as well as division chairs, depending on certain circumstances. So this is currently in the test account, which is why it says instructor withdrawal update. But this is kind of how the form looks. Under section and student, I think normally you guys have a little arrow. That arrow is gone, and it just says click to select the section. It works the same way. It's just the appearance of it, the system update. So you would click and your sections are available, and then after you select your section, you could click and select a student from that section. Still have the grade assigned, date of last attendance, and your comments. This is what I was referring to as forward dating. The date is August 9th. I cannot select anything after August 9th to either be the date of last attendance or the withdrawal date. 2 things that will pop up that are new. If your form is submitted or your submission date is more than 14 days from the withdrawal date, you will get a pop-up and it'll ask you to explain why. If you have this pop-up and you provide an explanation, there will be an email that's routed to division chairs. so, or your division chair, so that they see that email. The explanations in here, I know that there have been a lot of questions about how to put explanations and things like this. If you can provide why it's more than 14 days, because of a holiday or whatever the situation is, then that kind of helps with a lot of other reports that we do. The newer one is to please indicate why the last date of attendance and the withdrawal date are more than 14 days apart. I know that a lot of times, especially class meets 1 day a week or even 2 days a week, and we throw a holiday in there, it is very possible that the date of last attendance is more than 14 days from the withdrawal date. If you can provide us with the information such that Tuesday the 15th was a holiday, and so that extended the time between the date of last attendance and the withdrawal date, then that explanation will help when we have to do our equal report. We've also made some changes. We've added some fillable PDFs to documents that are not currently in eReeve. So grade change form, for example, if you have any grades that need to be changed after the semester is over, you can complete that in a PDF document. If you need that, I can always send it out, but I do email it to everyone at the end of the term. But if you need it any other time, just let me know and we'll get it out to you. We communicate mostly through coastal email addresses. So when students talk to you about or needing to communicate with the registrar's office, they do need to communicate through their coastal email. We use that as a way to ensure that we are talking to who we're supposed to be talking to. And the same is true with faculty. So when you're submitting documents like these fillable PDFs and you're unable to physically sign the form, having it sent through your coastal email address is considered a signature for us at this time. We do have 2 generic email accounts that help facilitate responses in a quicker manner. So if you email registrar@coastalcarolina.edu, there are at least 3 people that access that email account, and admissions at coastalcarolina.edu has about 2 people, I believe, answering that one. So anytime you need to reach someone, this is probably the best way. If you try to email me directly and I decide to take a week off of work for whatever reason, then trying to email me, I may not get to it for a while. We do have some forms in the future coming up. The grade change form is one of them. It will be done through eReeve. We're working on some kinks with that one based on how far we can go back to make grade changes. And then the late entry request. If we have a student that wants to enter or enroll in your class and it is after the census date, at this time you have to get VP Tootin permission. We are working on a form that will do that routing for you guys. The only other thing that I'm going to mention, before I get to my questions section, is that if a student is requesting to withdraw from a class and they're talking to you about it, have them email the registrar's office instead of doing the instructor withdrawal form. When we identify an instructor withdrawal form, we're assuming it's because the student exceeded the attendance policy. And so when they ask us questions, why was I withdrawn from this class or whatever happened, we can identify and say, well, the instructor submitted a withdrawal form because you exceeded the attendance policy. So if a student contacts you and says, I want to withdraw from the class, and you fill out the form because they just wanted to withdraw, it kind of skews our data a little bit. So we're asking that if the student's requesting to withdraw, please encourage them to email registrar. If they do not email registrar and they just stop showing up, once they've exceeded the attendance policy, then you can do your instructor withdrawal form. Any questions for me?
With 36 people in here, there have to be some questions.
They don't want to. They've all muted us.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
with online classes, it could, we try to count them. We give them their 2 weeks, right, to do their assignments. And then if they don't participate in those 2 weeks, should we drop them then, or do we give them, they exceed it when they go into week 3? But that would put us way past that 14-day.
It does, and it's going to pop up every single time, and that's fine, because what you have to do, the way we have to report it is we use our attendance policy, and our attendance policy says that a student cannot be withdrawn until they've exceeded the attendance policy. So they can basically miss 3 weeks before they're withdrawn in classes that take attendance 1 time a week. So when that pop-up comes up, all you would have to do is say, I took attendance on Thursday the 12th, and then Thursday the 19th, the student missed the 12th, the 19th attendance, and exceeded on the 26th.
Okay.
That's all we really need. And because according to the FSA handbook, there are exceptions to the 14-day mark that they are requiring, and these are exceptions because they are following our attendance policy.
Okay.
I know that different divisions are doing different things, and I do encourage you to speak to your division chair about some of that. But basically, if you take attendance 1 day a week, you're going to have more than 14 days if the student just stops attending.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Other questions?
Anyone?
Bueller?
Oh.
Oh, Dan had his hand raised, but he's lowered it.
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, there's Dan.
Quick question.
The
I'm
answer is
looking
no.
at attendance. Blackboard automatically populates for the online classes a bunch of probably every date before the census date. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do I have to keep those?
In Blackboard?
Yeah, because I'm actually going to take attendance on different dates. So
It is required to keep it in Blackboard through the census date because I don't think you can delete them because they come directly from colleague.
okay.
Does
All right.
that make sense?
Do I have to use them? Because if I'm going to take
You don't
attendance,
have to use them. The reason that they are there for every day up to the census date, online partials and hybrid classes, is because a student can technically enroll in any of those dates. And with our enrollment verification process that we have for online classes, if the student your assignment might be due on the 17th of August. Even though classes started on the 16th, you give an assignment due on the 17th. Well, I work Monday and Tuesday night, so I'm not going to log in until Wednesday night. You can count me enrolled on Wednesday night, even though it's not your attendance day.
gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep, makes sense.
That's why they've done that.
Should I, for reporting purposes, should I make the attendance dates, even like if the first one's on the 18th, let's say, should I make that a separate day in the attendance for Blackboard, for the online? You know what I'm saying? Or no?
No.
So like all those dates are there to enter the class, but I'm going to actually have an assignment due that day for lab, a week 1 lab assignments due that day, right? A check-in, all right, whatnot. And so should I put a additional meeting in the Blackboard attendance and define it as the lab attendance 1 or whatever I want to define it as? Or should I just leave it?
You can, and that might make it easier for you to see.
Okay.
There's nothing that says you can't add days to it.
Okay.
But when we print your roster, it's just going to have it the one time.
That's fine. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we move on to Matt? Anthony.
Okay. I have been telling faculty teaching online that they need to go into the Blackboard space and just create their own attendance sheet, because it does it for a few days or it's not really there well. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's fine. You can always add days. I just can't take away the days that are already there, I don't think.
Gotcha.
Yep, add as many days as you want. All right.
All right. Well, you guys think about some more questions while we turn it over to Matt DeEmilio. Little Matt.
Hello, everyone. Heather has a bunch of nicknames for me if you didn't know already. So I just want to go over the electronic workflows as well as other stuff like the law and all of that stuff. So process for requesting accommodations, which there's a little more than that title. So next, the importance of accommodations is to create an equal playing field, help guide students, and create an environment where that student may do best. Now it's important to be mindful. I'm not going to go into these examples, but the purpose of this slide is just to show that it's not good to assume, what that individual may be going through, and just how you may be able to work with that individual. Now, instructors and students will be talking a lot more about accommodations. So I think it's important to understand first-person language. So when a student is talking to you, these aren't special accommodations. There's nothing special about them. They're just accommodations. And it's important to approach them in a way that they feel comfortable, because if that first, when they approach you, so if they're going to be approaching you, you're not going to be approaching them. But when you are having that conversation with them, it's important to have a good example with them and understand what's going on, so that they will come back and talk to you, because they don't want. Okay, next one. So down to the instructors and students relationship. So in this, I would want the student to advocate for themselves, but the transition period from high school to college is very difficult. So I work with students for them to understand how to advocate for themselves. And the way you do that is to advocate with a plan. So the individual with a disability needs to understand their disability. They need to understand how best they learn. And so they can have that plan coming to you to talk about their accommodations. Now, as an instructor, you have the power. For example, for any student in your class, you could extend a deadline because of circumstances, or if they emailed you because of something, a death in the family, or there could be a bunch of reasons. That's why you decide to extend their assignment. Now, I think it's also important to listen to understand instead of listen to answer, because that individual could be going through a lot, and it's also important on the student's part to let you know what's going on in a reasonable time frame. So I tell all my students, if you need an extension and you want to ask for an extension, you don't ask for an extension the day after it's due. It's important to give the instructor some time frame as to what's going on, and you don't need to go into crazy depth. Say you just had a death in the family. I think it's important to just say I've actually am attending a funeral. Am I able to get a few more days on this certain assignment? Next, we're going to go into the law. So Section 504 Rehabilitation Act 1973 just basically covers that we cannot discriminate on any recruitment, educational process, or treatment of students. And students who self-identify and provide documentation should be receiving reasonable accommodations, and they should all be included in all educational programs and activities. And then ABA of 1990s is just stating that under the Civil Rights Act that it protects an individual with disabilities from discrimination, and define disability as a mental and physical impairment that limits one or more major life activities. So I wanted to go into some legal battles, and this is not for me to scare you. This is for me to just go over what I've seen and what I've done some research on. Is that so the school in Nebraska Community College failed to provide students with extended time, and they treated them in a different way compared to their classmates when grading. Now, the college had to go through an agreement process, refunds, and large amounts of training. We had a chemistry instructor, and I'm not doing this. I didn't make this up. This is an actual case. So I'm not excluding these chemistry or math instructors. But they did not place accommodations for students with these certain disabilities. And they also had to remove the course from their GPA and meet certain deadlines for training for faculty. And then OCR was still continuing to monitor. Then we had a math instructor that did not approve academic adjustments or extended time. So that also is extensive training. So it's just important to understand the purpose of accommodations. And Office Civils writes, most common complaint is not providing awarded accommodations to students. So this is important because I have a lot of students that think they need to just change. So every student has the right to be exactly who they are. I thought this was a great quote, so I had to put it in here. So some unreasonable accommodations is if there's a direct threat to one's health or safety. This could be in like a science lab for if they had a service animal, or if someone was a health concern, and if it's changing the curriculum as in a fundamental alteration, and then any undue financial burden that we may be experiencing because of this. Now, some reasonable accommodations, these are not all of them, but some are extended time, smart pens or assistive technology, visual aids, priority seating, clear black on white, print on white paper for individuals with visual impairments, computer software, note takers, and interpreters. Now I'm going to get into what are rights and responsibilities at the colleges, and then I will go into our workflow. So we have the right to request documentation to support their requests, deny a request that doesn't show the need of what they are requesting for, select effective accommodations, and refuse accommodations that impose a fundamental alteration, and are responsible to accommodate the known limitations or barriers, ensure everything's accessible in all formats, maintain confidentiality, and provide accommodations without the level of instruction. Now, the student's right and responsibility is equal access to everything, always. Equal opportunity to learn, work, and receive these reasonable accommodations, and they are supposed to keep everything confidential as well. And responsibilities would meet qualifications for all programs, self-identify their disability status, because we don't know if they have a disability until they tell us, and then provide disability documentation, and then they would follow our steps for implementing their accommodation letter, which I'm going to get into later on. Okay. Now, faculty's rights and responsibility. You have the right to request a written agreement before allowing a recording device in your classroom. And this form is basically going to say that the student is just using this recording device to for their educational purposes only. They're not going to take you to the court of law to sue you because of what you said something in your class. All students must abide by the behavior and conduct policy because they are a student and they follow the same guidelines that everyone else does. And you're able to challenge an accommodation. We just mean say you got to meet with me or email me or give me a call to go over how the accommodation is a fundamental alteration. Responsibilities would provide reasonable accommodations for students and do not provide accommodations without a written accommodation letter. Now that's meaning that it's important to follow the letter, but if you're going to extend a deadline for the whole class, that's not an accommodation because you're giving it to everyone else. No statement that is a student is different or less than anyone else in the general public. Okay, so here's a workflow of a student requesting accommodation. So the student would apply to the college, then they would request a welcome meeting, and in that welcome meeting, I go over, what barriers they've receiving, what maybe services they received before, if they had any services in high school, how this may be impacting their learning, and what accommodations they may be requesting. Then the student would submit documentation for review, and then I would review the documentation and schedule a second meeting to discuss the approved accommodations. And then I will explain the implementation process to the student, so that it's important for them to talk to their instructor, and they have to give their letter or email their letter to their instructor to talk about their accommodations. And then I'll go into the faculty's responsibility. So my responsibility is to email all students their accommodation letter a few days before class starts. They're probably going to go out today or tomorrow, And then in the email, I will explaining their student responsibilities, that they have to email their letter or bring a hard copy to faculty. And if they don't do that, then their instructors will not know that they are even receiving accommodations. And then once letters have been emailed, I do constantly check in on them. Now, the student's responsibility, they'll bring a copy to you, like I've said. They may email the letter to set a time to meet or to talk during office hours, or that maybe they're not in, they're in a different state, so they're taking an online class, so they're just going to email you, to talk about their accommodations. Now, during that conversation, they'll talk about what they're receiving, and that conversation could go, you could talk about the accommodations. You could also talk about how your class runs, or, this may be a new student that's nervous and they express that concern, so you're talking. And then instructor's responsibility would do please read every letter you receive, because accommodation may change. A student can come into my office and change at any time, as long as they can provide documentation to support their request. And then once the student has reached out to you, you'll have an acknowledgement form. And I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. And the form is stating that you acknowledge and you receive the form. So let me stop this and let me share my screen. And I would show you what it looks like. Can everyone see this? I can't see it.
I see it.
Yes.
Okay, you can see it. Okay, so here's the acknowledgement form. This will be in the MyCC portal, where you can, by the start of classes, so on Monday the 16th, and you'll be able to fill this out once the student brings you their letter or emails it, and you'll fill out their name, your name, the course. You're going to check this box that you have acknowledged that you have received the student's accommodation notification, and then any fundamental alterations or notes. So in here, you could put student decided they did not want to use extended time, or did not want to use the, whatever accommodation they decide they didn't want to use, although I encourage all students to use all of their accommodations. And then maybe if there's a fundamental alteration, you would submit this, and then I'll put it in their folder, and I will know that there was a request that this was a fundamental alteration, and then I will talk with my team to figure out how we can go about this and get this all figured out for the student. Okay, we're going to stop sharing. Okay, let me see. So yes, and then after that form is submitted, I'll send a notification to the student, letting them know that I received an acknowledgement form from the following instructors of this course. And if this course is not listed and you have talked to your instructor, please reach out to them for them to fill out the form. Do we have any questions?
Anthony had a question.
Yeah, I've got several questions today. You may have said this, but just to make it clear, so when the students are bringing the form to us, we are as faculty are keeping the form?
So they're bringing you their accommodation letter, or they can
Correct.
email it.
That's
the
correct.
acknowledgement form is okay, a separate form. I just wanted
So
to
we're keeping the letter from the student.
Yeah, if they were to bring you a copy, yes.
Okay, great. I think it's helpful to have a copy so we know what the accommodations are for them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions?
There have got to be questions. Dan has a
Yes, Dan?
question.
Correct.
I wrote several things down. So one of the things that is kind of it gets me is that I'll have seated students that come in like the day of the test or I get an email the morning of the test that say they have accommodations. So is there are the students told like you need to do this within like the first week of school so that we make sure, because if I have a test at 8 in the morning, I'm here at 7:45, I'm not getting that test to the testing center until like noon, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. So the student needs, just like there's a time for there's a reasonable time to get a certain requested accommodation. There should be a time that they're able to um, let you know, and it shouldn't be the day of the test. Now, I mean, I would like for if we could work with the student, but I mean, I understand when it's really like late notice. But you know, if it's a day or two before, you know, maybe
Well,
I think
my question then is, because should I make an announcement the first day of class about if you are an ADA student, I'm looking forward to your email or something like that, or should I just not even talk about it?
I think it would be reasonable if you are announcing it to the entire class, honestly.
yeah,
But Dan, this is how we're trying to keep that situation from happening, is by saying you have to bring this to your instructor the first day. We have to receive the acknowledgement form. Now, we're not supposed to have you provide accommodations if someone has not brought their letter to you. So obviously, if they haven't shared it with you, then you're not going to know and you're not providing those accommodations. But technically, if they bring it to you the day of the test, they are sharing it with you. But that's why Matt's reaching out to them several times, starting the first week of class, saying, you have to bring this to your instructor. This is the timeline. It has to be reasonable. So we can't say that it won't happen because we know that it will, but really hoping
Right,
that
right.
this is going to keep that happening to a minimum.
and I have told students that we need to pick when if we're going to take a test at the testing center. So I think it's reasonable if they want to take the test in the class the first test to see how they do. But there isn't like a week 1 I want to take at the test center. Week 2 I don't. Week 3 I do. Week 4 I
Right.
don't. You see what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
So we need to
Yep.
pick, you know, what we're going to do. And like I said, it's reasonable to maybe give it a try the first time. But there isn't like a guessing game as to if we're taking it to the testing center or not.
Gotcha. Another thing, are we allowed, like, let's say I have a student and they didn't identify as an ADA. I don't know if they are, never talked about it before. If I see a student that I see knows my material or the material that I'm teaching in this course, but yet they never finish on time, can I just give them a testing extra time in the testing center without going through you? I thought I could do that.
Would you give that to any other student that may be struggling to finish the test?
Depends. And so sometimes you can tell that the student is a slow worker because they do 1 through 8 are all perfect and then they don't finish the rest, if that makes sense. Where I don't know, I guess you can, this is only for C class, I wouldn't be able to tell online, but
Yeah.
are we allowed to do that, or is that not okay?
I mean, I think as long as you would allow that for every student, like you wouldn't need,
I
then
don't
it's
think
not
I'm
an
allowed to.
accommodation.
I don't think I'm allowed to though, because we can't just have the whole class go to the testing center.
But I
Yes.
think what he's saying, like, if this is something, if any student came up to you and said, I really need some additional time, if you would say yes to any student who requested that, then it's acceptable. I think is
Okay,
what,
so yeah, I don't
not
do that.
would you give the entire class extra time on a specific test, but if you saw anybody who was struggling, would you say, would you prefer some extended time?
Okay, all right, I see what you're saying. Okay, that makes sense.
I think faculty have a lot of different, you have a lot of leverage to say, I know the student is struggling and this is what I can do to help. And I think that if it's help that you would provide to anybody, that you can do whatever you would like within the confines of your classroom. And if they have an accommodation letter, it's just us telling you that they have the documentation that you are required to provide it versus do you think it's something that you can or you should provide? Does that make sense, or am I talking in
Yep.
circles?
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. All right. Thank you.
Hey, Matt, Alex asked, what can you tell us about service animals in the classroom?
So there's only two questions we're allowed to ask. What does the job, is this a service animal? And what task is this animal doing? Usually individuals that have a service animal are recommended to come see me to get a letter created because they need a service animal in the classroom. Now, if you had a service animal in, a lab where there was a lot of chemicals, you would have to, and it could be like a health concern to the dog, then that's when we would, that would maybe a fundamental alteration, and maybe we can figure out how we could go around that. I don't know what the school was, but I know there was a school that actually dressed up the dog in like lab gear to be able to, be a part of the class. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Was there a specific question that you had about that, Alex? Are dogs the only animals allowed in the classroom?
From the ADA guidelines, we are allowed to have miniature horses as well. Haven't seen one of those yet, but
we haven't had one, but really excited. I think, Alex, there are the differences between emotional support animals, which we do not allow in the classroom, but an actual service animal has to be either a dog or a miniature horse. Matt, Sabrina just asked, with my program, time is a factor for all students. Extra time clinically makes it look like favoritism. How do I avoid the stereotype while I protect the students' rights? It looks unfair to everyone else that one gets extra time always.
Gotcha. Okay, so extra time in clinical would be a fundamental alteration, but there could be like maybe extra time for practice hours that don't count towards clinical, but gives them more remediation to be able to learn that skill, so that then they are doing that time, they're able to do it in the time frame as what the state board is asking. No problem.
Did that answer your question, Sabrina?
Mishelle said she's buying a miniature horse. Oh, okay.
Well, I feel like that should be included in our raises. We should all get miniature horses.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else have a question specifically?
I have a question. So if we have all our classes are hybrids, and so most of the students are working on their own computers at home half the time, how do we can't really extend time with that? I mean, because they have from Monday to the following Sunday to get the assignments done, right? Because they're working at home on their own computers on their own time.
Yes, unless the student had like extended time on assignments, maybe due to a medical concern. But when it comes to time, it'd be more for tests, not assignments.
Yeah, so, okay. Okay, so it's more for tests, not the assignments. Okay.
And I think that it's important too that if someone has a question like that, if they say I need extended time on a specific assignment, that would be basically a time to start a dialogue about, expectations, and this is what, my expectations are, and maybe we can meet with the coordinator for disability services to go over expectations and what can be done.
Or I think another important thing is to figure out why. Why are they not making a finishing? And that doesn't necessarily need by an instructor. It could be a success coach. It could be me, as to like maybe we don't have a schedule, or we have this schedule in our head that we think we follow, but that's not what it works. So it's important to have a schedule that's on paper, or that we know, and we're chunking out our time in the appropriate way to get our assignments done.
Does everybody feel comfortable with this new process? Does everyone kind of understand what we're looking at with this one?
And the reason we've moved this as an e-tree form is because this is a form that's coming from the accommodation database and is secure, and me, Heather, and Angie Perry are the only ones that have a login.
All right, well, while you guys are thinking about it, one thing that I do want to mention is that, as Mishelle said, we have those specific generic email addresses that it's a lot easier for us to get access to because several people in the office have them. So if you have students who are interested in changing a curriculum or adding or dropping a class or applying to limited enrollment programs, please ask them to send an email. If they choose not to stop by, please ask them to send an email either to the registrar at Coastal Carolina or admissions at Coastal Carolina. That will hopefully ensure that they're getting responses more quickly. As of yesterday, we are back in our offices here in student services. So some of you may have walked by and saw us hanging out in the cafeteria for about a year now. And now we are back in our offices in the student center. But still, people want to work with us over email. That's absolutely acceptable. Does anybody have any questions about admissions, registration, disabilities, anything in general? Cool. Mishelle, you have anything? She was asleep.
I was not asleep. I was actually no. There's not anything else I can think of. And I know that there gets to be a lot of confusion, especially with online classes and attendance. Don't hesitate to ask questions. If there's questions about your roster or how to fill something out, if there's questions about students who've disappeared because we processed a dereg for non-payment or they dropped the class and switched to another section, just any questions you have, don't hesitate to ask. We're here and answering questions whenever you need us. So come see us or email us, or you can call anytime.
I just thought of something else, just so everybody knows, and you can tell all your coworkers as well. We will still be registering students next week as well. And I think that Monday and Tuesday, right, Mishelle? As long as there's available space in a classroom, we'll be registering students. What we are telling that student to do is to reach out to you all specifically to let them know that they have been added to your class. So someone may show up, and again, we're not doing this with classes that are at capacity, of course. But if someone does show up to your class and you don't have them on your original roster, please be on the lookout for an email from one of us letting you know that they have actually been registered for that class. Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording once I figure out how to do that. And I hope you guys have a fabulous rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you, everybody, again.
Bye.
Bye.
Heather, go to the top left.
I found it.